we did our best work when we got deep into the business, being invited into meetings that we, probably you wouldn't have even thought to include us in, all in the spirit of better ideas, more global consistency, and moving faster.
Welcome to Real Creative Leadership, a place where creative leaders can find insights and practical guidance on the day-to-day job of being a creative leader. We focus on real issues, topics, and insights of creativity in the business world. Join me as we explore the best strategies for developing your team, getting others to embrace your vision, and generating amazing experiences. This webinar series is produced by the Stoke Group. I'm your host, Adam Morgan, Adobe Executive Creative Director and author of Sorry Spock Emotions Drive Business. And this is Real Creative Leadership. Hello, we're so excited to have you here. This is Season 2, Episode 4. We are going to be talking about how do you build and create an environment at your company to foster creativity. And I know this is a big one. There are a lot of articles that I've read out there on the intrawebs of how you do it. And it's what's funny about it is most of the time, most of those articles are talking about the physical environment, where they're talking about, oh, you need this kind of mood lighting, or you need these colors on the wall, or you know, this kind of design around you. And I've seen a lot of agencies and companies who put a good focus on those physical aspects. And I think those are important, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the other stuff. We're going to talk about, leadership tactics, team tactics, whatever you need to do to help create the right environment, not just physically, but also, emotionally and like strategically, so that you have the right things in play in order to have great creative ideas. So I am honored today to have with me John Coyne, and he is going to, we're going to start out with letting him talk about, his background and where he is, but he is an awesome, awesome individual. We worked together years ago and I was highly, highly impressed. So I'm so grateful to have him on the show today. So John, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you just tell our audience like who you are, where you're from, a little bit about your background so they get a good idea of who you are before we jump into this conversation.
Yeah, awesome, Adam. Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me. It is always a pleasure to get to see you and spend time with you again. So hi everybody, John Coyne. Currently I lead brand creative and media team over at Intel. I've been at Intel about 4 years, as a matter of fact, exactly 4 years. Ooh. And prior to that, I had a stint at Adobe where Adam and I got to work together, which was awesome. Prior to that, my whole career for longer than I care to admit, it's all been on the agency side. 18 years at Goodby Silverstein and Partners, where I had the opportunity to really work on big global complex brands and do tons of award-winning and really satisfying and rewarding work with some of the smartest and best people I've ever worked with. So that was obviously a very formative time in my career. Prior to that, I've been at different agencies, most of which was at a couple of different offices within the BBDO network as well. So I have been on a learning journey through my whole career, obviously very focused on creative ideas, creative product. I love the opportunity to be in a big company like Intel and try to just infuse creative thinking and bringing that as a strategic weapon, obviously, to our business. So I'm excited to be here.
Oh, excellent. And I do want to point out one thing and maybe give a little more light on this. Oftentimes on the show, we bring on creative leaders, meaning it's someone who's been a creative director or a writer or designer or something. And John, you're coming from a different angle. You come from the strategy side of the house. And so that's a different thing, but it's really important to note that because you're still a huge champion of creativity. And I want everyone to know, like, being a creative leader doesn't mean you have to be a creative, in the traditional sense at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, starting in strategy and account service work, and started my career when those two positions actually all sat together in one person. I've always believed in the importance of strategy, understanding the business strategy as well, to make sure that all the creative thinking is obviously lined up against, what the customer needs, as well as what's going to drive the business goal in the end. So I have, a great respect and appreciation for what creative people go through, and recognize that I have a huge, and my team has a huge responsibility in setting creatives up to be able to succeed. So it's a very symbiotic partnership.
Well, let's dig into that partnership a little bit more, because when we talked earlier, you talked about how important it was for you to have a deep partnership with creative teams and why that matters. Tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on creating that partnership.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was kind of raised in the business, so a little bit of an anomaly in terms of my background. You know, my dad had his own advertising agency. My mother worked there as well. We grew up, you know, as kids. You know, other families might talk about politics or local news around the dinner table. We talked about advertising. We talked about creativity. We talked about campaigns and ideas, and those were my formative years, which is, you know, fascinating. So I was kind of doomed to kind of have to go down this path of you know, kind of staying in advertising. So that was my background. So I always understood that really the only thing that anybody sees at the end of all that we do, the end product is the work. And that creative product is what represents all of the thinking and all of the meetings and all of the great strategic insights we have. So I've always understood that my, you know, the most effective place I can spend my energy, quite frankly, is is with creative leaders, trying to make sure that they've got everything they need to be able to, you know, really have breakthrough ideas. So great example of that is, you know, my long tenure at Goodby, which is obviously a very creative agency. My first stop every morning was my creative partner. 11 of those years while I was there, you know, it was a guy named Steve Simpson, who was, you know, my creative partner while I was there. He went on to do other great things since then. But we would spend the beginning part of every day together, trying to problem solve, kind of talk about, you know, work we had on the table, presentations we had coming up, and we really wanted to make sure that we were aligned on what we were not only doing ourselves, but what we had our teams focused on, so that we didn't have any disconnects. And that Steve really valued the partnership with me from a kind of a strategy and then just a business overview standpoint. And he wanted to make sure that that was always in the center of the creative ideas that he and his teams were working on. So that's how I started every day. If he didn't call me at 8 in the morning, I was in his office at 9 in the morning. And that was kind of how we started every day. And it worked, you know, for about a decade together like that. So I've continued to really invest in those creative relationships, you know, since then, because that is, you know, as I said, that's the key to making everything go.
Yep. And I want to be careful here. Like, we're not just talking about, there are many, you know, episodes where we talk about relationships, but this is such a critical part. If you're building the environment, you've got to have those relationships right first. And talk to me more about like the long haul versus transactional. Like, why does it matter? Like, and move it beyond not just, you know, your partner inside your company, but also if you have agencies that you're working with and having those long-term relationships with agencies as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I have spent much of my career working, this is ironic because I'm not really a tech person. I can barely get my computer to work most days, but I've spent most of my career working with tech companies, you know, Apple, HP, Cisco, Adobe, at Intel, and we have really complex businesses. You know, technology companies are complex. We talk to many different audiences. We have global businesses. The technology is complicated to figure out. And, you know, my experience has been that we, by having a long-term partners together, we're able to really kind of get to those deeper understanding of how the technology actually works, what it's actually enabling, the much deeper insights, you know, with our audiences in terms of how to really talk about the technology in a way that's relevant. And, you know, my experience is that to get to those insights and to be able to deliver that kind of work, you've got to get deep in the business. we don't have a lot of success, certainly, at Intel and not other companies I've worked with, where you've got teams just kind of parachuting in and out. Just because what I find is typically creative people almost have to work through the obvious ideas, all the things that because they don't really have a depth of understanding, you kind of have to work through all these obvious ideas and roots first that, before you get to the stuff that's really good underneath that. And we just don't have time for that. Our business moves so fast. The timelines that we're operating under are under such pressure to move faster that I find that we have the ability to move fastest at the best depth, with the work that has the most integrity, with teams that really are partners with us and not just kind of transactional thinkers, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally. In fact, it's what you talked about is really interesting, because you think about the life cycle of a B2B, purchasing decision is usually like a year and a half. And then we think we can just swoop in and have a B2C mindset of just oh yeah, let's just tell a quick, fun story. And it just doesn't work. It doesn't. And tell me more, because you've brought up an interesting topic, which is it's not just having longevity on your team, but also your partners, meaning agencies. And talk to me about agency of record, because that is not very common today. Back in the day, there were a lot of relationships between agencies and brands that were long-term, but it is more transactional these days, and it has changed. So let's hear more of how that helps build the environment by having that relationship.
Yeah, so we at Intel, one of the things that we were able to do last year is really look at our creative needs across the board. And Intel's a big company. We create a lot of content. We do a lot of work, some of it highly visible, on very, very visible, high profile properties, and some of it, pretty deep and niche, to really niche audiences. We serve everybody from, grandma wanting to buy a PC in Italy to, data scientists, in PRC, and everybody in between. So we really have a complex creative needs. So we obviously work with a variety of creative agencies to help us deliver that portfolio of work that we need. And we had a review last year after kind of assessing our agency roster, and made a decision to have a kind of a global creative review for an agency of record that we can begin migrating, kind of the majority of our business into. And we did that because we saw in the analysis that we did that Intel was showing up we call it, instead of one Intel, it was many Intels. We were just showing up very fractured, not clear who the brand was. We looked different, depending on what agency and what group inside Intel was creating work. We look like a different company every time. So one of the decisions that we made was to try to consolidate as much as possible into, an agency and a network, so that we can start getting some real consistency in the work horizontally across all of these different campaigns and content and social and everything else. So through that process, we brought on board VMLY&R, our global agency of record, and we are really able to scale with them across so much more work. And for my team, that engagement is a lot more efficient because we don't have to reinvent the wheel in conversations every time that we have a new project to start up. It's, I'm dealing with the same senior leadership team. We're able to ramp up teams quickly on different assignments and just to be able to move so much faster and then have the work all elevate and to be delivering a consistent brand message, no matter what we're doing, no matter even if it's a nurture campaign, that we're running in Germany, it still has to accrue back to the brand and leverage the brand. I found that just was difficult for us to make that happen. And we ended up with work that was not attached to anything else at Intel. So one of the ways to help solve that was to kind of bring this all together. And what we're finding is that we're also able to get our agency partners deeper into the business. So one of the things I fundamentally believe in, and again, I've learned this through my whole career on the agency side, because I found that we did our best work, whether I was at BBDO or Goodby, we did our best work when we got deep into the business.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be the agency that just showed up, for the creative meeting, in a conference room and then you leave. I wanted to make sure that we were present, in the halls of the company, being invited into meetings that we, probably you wouldn't have even thought to include us in. But that's how we got a depth of understanding about the business challenges, because the things you find that what we worry about every day on the client side is so much deeper and more complex than what most of our agencies get exposed to. So I wanted to make sure that we were as in deep on the business as we could, and then that helped us connect back to delivering creative work that was really able to be seen not just being as great creative ideas, which we strive to deliver on, but that it was clear what the tieback was to what executives inside the company is concerned about. And so that's one of the things that I really wanted to solve by bringing VMO Y&R on, is to get them really deep into the business, building relationships, getting to know our key executives, again, all in the spirit of better ideas, more global consistency, and moving faster. We just have to move faster, and we don't have to worry about the ramp up time every time we want to bring a new group on to take on a new assignment. Now, that said, there are, I look at every assignment that comes in, and if I feel like we don't have the perfect match in-house for something new that we need to do, we're always looking and always open to, what else we might need to bring in. So I don't ever want to be in a position of kind of force fitting a square peg in a round hole, so to speak. If we don't have the right creative solution for a particular problem that we've got to solve, then we've got to go figure out how to go get that. So we're always kind of, at the same time, I'm always open at the same time.
Well, that's awesome. Let's switch gears a little bit. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about creating a culture. So once you got the relationships in line, once you've got kind of like those, the deeper knowledge of the product, now talk to me about how you create a culture where ideas thrive. What are the things that you do? How do you bring it together? All the work behind the scenes that you have to take care of in order to create that culture. And what is the right culture in your mind?
Yeah, honestly, to me, culture is almost the biggest variable of success for us inside a company, and then for an agency to be able to come in and to be able to succeed. And by the way, I also we do have a small internal team as well. So we do some internal making as well as working with external agencies. So my team has the privilege of getting to manage all of that. And so I'm always very cognizant of the environment because we all know that ideas live or die kind of based on how you nurture them. And part of that nurturing process is the culture that that creative people are bringing ideas into. So we try really hard to build a culture of risk taking, and which is hard. It's especially hard, at big companies. Where big companies like predictability and they like success and they kind of like everything to work, and yet that doesn't necessarily get you to those kind of net new, just kind of blue sky places that can really exponentially help you to grow your business. So we really work hard to create a culture of risk taking and make sure that on our side, on the Intel side, that we set the expectation, even with our agencies, that we're ready to be pushed. We want to push each other. So please challenge us, bring us thinking that we haven't seen before, stretch us into places that we're really uncomfortable with. So that's something that we're really cognizant that we do and set up that culture. The other thing that we're very focused on is building a kind of a culture of building. And what I mean by that is it's very easy for us as clients to, let's pretend when we all sat around a room together at a conference table and could look each other eye to eye, but obviously apply the same thing to the way we all work virtually. But it's very easy for us to sit around a table and become judges. And, where we put on our judging hat, we know what the strategy is, we're looking at the ideas and we start evaluating them and, kind of picking ideas apart. And again, there's got to be an element, of course, of we've got to be able to evaluate ideas and decide, whether they're right or not. But I really encourage our teams to come into those meetings, not with kind of their judging hat on, but really with their building, kind of hat on. And what I mean by that is to start looking for, what you can add or look for. There may not be an idea in the room or on the video conference that's exactly right, but there may be a thread in the setup somewhere. There could be something buried in a social execution somewhere that actually could be the key to unlocking that bigger idea that we're all looking for. And if we just have that mindset of we're just here to judge and pass fail ideas as they come to us, we're really going to miss out on that opportunity to build together and find that interesting nuance that might be buried underneath something. So we really try to build a culture of building as opposed to kind of judging and evaluating. And I find that to be, and I think creative people respond so much better and are so much more willing to bring their little babies into the room, for us to all play with and and spend time with, if they know that they're going to be treated respectfully and have the chance to have the best opportunity for those ideas really to thrive.
And I think sometimes it's easy to say build a culture that's great, for risk taking and all this stuff, but talk to me more about what you're actually doing behind the scenes. How are you preparing other leaders? How are you modeling this? How are you setting the tone in meetings? I think that's a really interesting angle of how you create that perfect opportunity.
Yeah, well, on the risk taking side, any company will get in the end what they decide to measure and evaluate. So one of the things that's really important, that we're doing at Intel is we are actively rewarding people for risk taking, and so we're even we just had a meeting recently where we're looking, how do we start publicly rewarding and awarding people and teams for risk taking, for things that they've tried that may not even have succeeded, but it was brave. It took a lot of courage, and and again, it was informed, by data and thoughtful, analysis and decision making. It isn't just, hey, wow, I had a wild idea, give me some credit for that. It's got to be really thoughtful and thought out, but really rewarding and awarding people for those risk-taking ideas. So that's one of the things that we're doing, and that's one of the best ways to build that into your culture, is to make sure you're like give people awards for taking risks and trying things, because that catches fire, because it tells the rest of the organization we're really serious about this idea of risk-taking. It isn't just lip service, because it's very easy to say, yeah, we want you to take risks, but the minute something doesn't work, we're like all over you. Like, why didn't that work?
Why? Yes.
And because that's the surest fire way to make sure that team never takes another risk again. And what you'll get in that case is your agencies will be hesitant to bring those really kind of scary, crazy ideas to you, because they just think you're not open to them. And you really don't want to hear those. So that's a really important thing that we're doing. And I think the other thing is, I recognize kind of my role as a leader shepherding the creative product inside a big company, is I try to set a tone in a meeting that puts people in, again, kind of a building and more of a kind of more of a buying mood. And what I mean by that is, we're all dealing with a lot of things in the course of our day. We're under stress. Many of us are, teaching our kids, and then we're moving right into like a Zoom meeting to present. So we're all juggling so many things. We're all under such stress. It's easy to bring that stress into a creative review. And I try to work hard to get people to a mindset where we can set that aside and try to position meetings where we're going to be looking at creative work is really kind of something to be anticipated and to look forward to, and really kind of a little bit of joy in the middle of our day, and to really kind of tee things up that way. So trying to set a culture inside of Intel where people are coming to creative meetings excited and wanting to come in and look at creativity and build and to to bring their energy to the table. So that can be a challenge, given all the things that we are dealing with, but it's something that, I'm very cognizant as a leader and as a creative leader, is to set that culture and that environment that people are there because they're excited to engage with creative work. And then I find that through the process of that we get to better, we just get to better creative outcomes as a result of it. But it is, it can be a challenge. We're way too busy, we're way too scheduled, everybody's stressed. I just try to keep as much of that out of the room as possible.
And talk to me about the pre-work, because it's not just a matter of saying, hey, we're going to have fun in this meeting, everyone come in and be a builder. But I assume there's so much work you have to do, especially with leaders and getting approvals up the chain. You've got to prepare those people long before that meting ever happens, right?
Yeah, it's just so important, for any leader in any organization, no matter what we're doing. We all have, kind of a chain of command that, and whatever you're working on, to get it approved and get it live in the world, certain people are going to have to buy off on it and feel good about it. So it's really important to do the work ahead of time so that you really understand what success looks like for those key people that need to kind of buy off on whatever it is that you're working on. So that's the work that has to happen outside of, conference rooms or Zoom meetings where ideas are being shared, where you've got to be having conversations well in advance, understanding what it is that different executives or decision makers in the process are looking for. What do they need? What does success look like for them? What are their fears? What things went wrong, last time, they might have engaged on this project and they didn't get what they wanted, that they could be coming into the room with that in their head. So you kind of want to help people work through those things so that when, they are engaging again, in the creative process, that that they're able to see what it is that, success looks like for them in the room somewhere, in the strategic setup, in the and the creative idea, and the tie back to the business problem that they're wrestling with.
Talk more about that. Because that was an important thing you said when we talked earlier. Is how do you tie creativity to business outcomes? And you went through, there is depth there in how you get those leaders on board and tying, creativity solves this.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that we're all in business. We're held accountable to driving revenue and, accomplishing, our financial goals and our targets. And that's, I don't know any leader that is not, thinking about that. And particularly at a company like, Intel, where we're an engineering company, a technology company, maybe unlike a P&G or unlike, some packaged goods companies, we're not, marketing is not as built out and as recognized as, just technology and engineering. Totally makes sense. So it's important that we do a great job of making sure that those leaders that are more technically minded and very focused on driving business goals, that there's a very clear through line between what they're focused on every day and what they're worried about to how this, creative work and how this campaign or this content is going to help them accomplish that goal. And we need to really make sure that there's a very evident kind of red thread that connects that. So so part of that, you've got to do that work in advance. So you've got to know what that executive is concerned about, what their goals are, what they're trying to drive. You've really got to understand the business. And then, once you understand that, then, working with the strategy team and then the creative teams just making sure that that strategic thinking is going to help unlock that business opportunity and for that particular audience, that we're trying to reach and move. So it ultimately has to be a visible link back to that business problem and that challenge. And that's where, to me, the deep partnership comes in, because the more our agency partners understand the business and the business challenges and that transformation that we may be trying to make as a company, that they're going to be able to bring and reflect that thinking in all of their internal conversations, which adds a level of depth and sophistication to all the creative ideas. And so that's that red line, that through line, is just really critical.
Now, another thing that we talked about that was interesting is it's, setting the environment, setting the tone, setting the example. All of those things are great, risk taking. Another aspect is decision making. So talk to me about your experience in not naming names or specific brands or, times in your life, but where you see top down decision making versus bottoms up, and the difference of what that makes in creating an environment for creativity.
Yeah, it's a great question, because we're all working within a culture of, every company, functions a little differently. And, I find that the best thinking and the best work happens kind of not in either a top down or a bottoms up way, but, somehow that we're able to kind of bring those things together. Because the reality is what doesn't work, which is not a great repeatable formula, is when we just have tops down decision making and kind of authority and kind of dictating what we do. That may work on a kind of a project, by project, big strategic, moment, but it doesn't scale very well, because what it leaves out are those working teams that are the ones that really have to make these ideas come to life and really have to execute, particularly in global companies, which I've spent a lot of time working with. Those working teams, kind of from the bottom up, are the ones who ultimately are responsible for how that idea comes to life in a given market, and ultimately, kind of the day-to-day decisions are made that ultimately become that end work product. And so I find you've got to have support at the top for what you're doing. You need to have that air cover and that buy-in, to what you're doing, but you've got to have those working teams engaged and motivated, because the last thing that I want is to have teams at a working level that feel like their ideas don't matter.
Yep.
That feel like all the decisions are going to be made at the top, and whatever I think isn't going to matter anyway, because some leader is going to make the decision. And I've seen that. We've probably all seen that, where you've got that top-down decision making. And what I have seen happen in those cases are people sit on their hands. Yeah. We hire amazing people, and then they're afraid to share their thinking and their ideas. Well, why did they feel that way? Well, because the last time they did it, they were basically kind of cut off at the knees, and told how that thinking isn't right, or they were just ignored and weren't, the decision was made despite what they were saying. So it's really important to get that leadership at the top, but you've got to, the scale happens in those working teams leaning in, bringing their thinking, having their great ideas, because also you tie back to culture. That's what makes a culture vibrant and alive and happy and joyful, where everybody comes to work every day feeling like they can make a difference, that their ideas can really matter, and that a great idea can come truly from anywhere. So we work really hard to build a culture where everybody understands their role and everybody shows up with, again, that idea of leaning in to help build. So it's kind of top down doesn't scale, and then what it ends up doing, you kind of destroy the culture that you're building in an organization when you want people to kind of show up to work every day, but yet sideline their thinking.
You know, and I know I started the question with decision making, but I think it's more than that. You're right. Like you hit on some topics of when you want it to scale, you have to have the accountability and the authority, right? So people have to have ownership of some things. So it's not just one person at the top owns everything, not just decisions, but strategy, where we're going, all of those great ideas. So you need to have some ownership. So I found like on my teams of at least just giving some ownership to everyone helps a lot. And then also, accountability, meaning I can say you're in charge of this, project, or you're in charge of this, product, but there's got to be accountability where I'm going to follow up and say, did you do what you said you're going to do, and make sure you fulfill all that stuff. And then the last thing I want to talk on, this is probably our last questions, we're getting here on time, is the last thing you said is everyone can be creative. Everyone has ideas. But when we talked earlier, it's also like, everyone has different types of ideas. And so talk to me about bringing the right people in the room in order to improve success and getting, not just everyone in the room, but how do we get the right people in the room?
That's always so tough, particularly in big companies. And I know many people listening either work in or work with, large companies, and large companies tend to scale lots of people in meetings. If you're not careful, you easily have a meeting with 40 people all, zooming in or on a call, and yet, there may be, 9 people in the room that are actually there to help kind of make a decision or to share thinking that ultimately leads to somebody being able to make a decision. So, I actually find those meetings are really demoralizing and discouraging to an organization. We're all scheduled so much. Our schedules are so packed with meetings. I really encourage our teams to really be in the meetings that you really have a role. And again, if you are not just tops down leading, but you're really kind of empowering those working teams, there are plenty of meetings for your team members and your all your partners to engage to help move a project along, because it does take a small army sometimes to bring something big to market. So there's plenty of opportunities for team members to engage and contribute, but it's not everybody in every meeting. So you really do need to break the workflow down and try and figure out where am I in this development process, and who's critical at every stage. And you've kind of got to map out the working team to the kind of the leadership team, the executives, all on this journey to ultimately making a decision in the end. But my rule of thumb is you should have the people in the room that are either there to help share and present and bring an idea or thinking or creative idea forward, and have the people that need to help make a decision there. And if you're not one of those people, go focus on something else. Go take a break, take a walk your dog. I also find people are more interesting people at work when they can make a little headspace to go do something else. And so there's plenty of things people can be doing when you don't have 40 people all piled into a room with 32 of them having no real role except to listen.
Listening in, yeah. Well, this has been great. I mean, some of the things, just to recap what we've talked about, in building an environment for creative ideas to thrive, it starts with relationships, long-term relationships. It's setting the mood as a leader. It's, going and doing all the pre-work, making sure you get everyone on board. It's encouraging people to come to meetings with a builder hat rather than just a judging hat. It's also, doing all the, bringing the right people into the room. It's empowering them, bringing working teams up, and making sure everyone's, balanced and has accountability and ownership, all of those things. I think these are great topics of how do you build that environment. And it all starts with you as a leader. It all starts with you setting the tone, setting up the culture, and making sure all of that's going to happen. So I think that these are awesome ideas. Thank you so much, John, for sharing all of this.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a privilege to be able to be in a creative business. Honestly, I feel like every day, I get to come to work or walk into my office, which is about 20 steps from my bedroom. Every day I get to to be here. You just have an opportunity to do something that's really fascinating and interesting and has the chance to impact culture. And I just think we are all privileged to be in this position. It really is an honor, and to be able to lead in a position like this is, it's just a life's dream. So I appreciate everybody you've got, here in this community, engaged with what you're doing here. This podcast is amazing. Thank you for inviting me in and being able to reconnect and work with you on this as well, Adam. It's a privilege.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate your thoughts. And you're right. It's going to take a community to change the world in terms of elevating creative leadership where, we can impact businesses in a positive way more often. So thank you. So the last question, if people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Well, it's a great question. Yeah, I'd love to hear from people. So you can obviously find me on LinkedIn. Not too hard to find there. And also feel free to drop me an email. I'll give you my personal email address.
Ooh, bold.
Yes, but please, John J. Coyne, Coyne, 64 @gmail.com.
Oh, excellent.
And love to hear from you. And honestly, if you got any ideas, questions, please send them my way.
Oh, that's excellent. All right. Well, let's end this episode. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in there with us. There's been some great stuff here. As always, you can go to realcreativeleadership.com, and in the show notes, you can get any of the links that we've talked about, or any of the topics, and just follow up and go back over it. You can find this on YouTube, on your favorite podcast platform, wherever you're listening. We appreciate you joining in. And as always, our final ask is, if you are listening in and you enjoy this content, please share, like, approve, give good reviews, whatever it is that you can do to help show that this movement of bringing creative leadership to a higher level is important. If it's important to you, your actions will help guide it and help us make more content and reach out to more people. So we appreciate you listening in. Thank you so much, John, for joining us. This was an awesome episode. As always, this was brought to you by the Stoke Group. They handle all the production on this, and we appreciate their partnership in creating this great show. And I'm Adam Morgan, Executive Creative Director at Adobe. You can reach me on my website, adamwmorgan.com, or follow me on any of these other Real Creative Leadership platforms. So thanks for joining, and next time we're going to talk a little bit deeper about creating an environment and digging even more. So thank you, John, for setting the stage of what we can learn about in creating an environment for creativity.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Adam.
Right. We'll see you all later. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Real Creative Leadership. I'm your host, Adam Morgan, and this series was brought to you by the Stoke Group. For the most effective marketing, use both sides of your brain to align your strategy, creative execution, and analysis. Connect with the Stoke Group for help designing each step of your marketing plan and creating a coherent vision. Visit thestokegroup.com to learn more.